I will open the project I've been working on and select the CRUD Part 1, press Ctrl C to copy. I'll go up to the project and press Ctrl V to paste, and I'll name it CRUD Part 2. Again, CRUD is an acronym for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. I will open the CRUD Part 2 folders and look at the files that I have saved there. I'll open the header.php file and change the title so it reflects the current project I'm working on. I'll right-click on the CRUD Part 2 folder and select Upload to the web server, just to make sure I get all those files and folders uploaded. When I make changes, I can use Ctrl Save to upload, but I like to make sure that I get all of the folders uploaded. I'll go down to the index.php file and right-click and open in browser. You can see I have the table that has my data that it pulls from the database, along with update and delete buttons that don't do anything yet. In the view folder, I'm going to add a couple files. The first one will be movie_add, and the second one will be movie_update. I'll use these to add and update the records. I'm going to open the movie list PHP file. At the bottom, underneath the table, I'll insert a form. The purpose of this is just going to be a button that will take me to the form where I can add a movie. In that form, I'll set up an input element with type hidden, name action, and the value for that will be show add form. I'll include another input element with type submit. It's going to be a button with those classes btn and btn default with the value of add movie. That will allow me to go to that show add form so the user can add a movie. If I save and refresh, now you'll see that button appears below the table. Next, I need to go to my movie add.php file, and I'm going to insert a form. I'm going to be using a lot of HTML markup and some PHP code here. First thing at the top, I'll include the header. At the bottom, I'll include the footer. In between that, I'm going to include an H4 heading for add movies, along with a horizontal rule, that's the HR. That'll just put a line across the top underneath the heading. And I'll insert a form with the class form horizontal action of period. That means when the user submits, it's going to go back to that index file, and that serves as the controller and decides what happens from there. With the method of post, I'll insert a div with the class form group. For all my text boxes, I want labels that are associated with them. That's what the for attribute does. It's going to be associated with an input element that has the ID of title. That will be my movie title. I'm adding some classes to the divs and label to make it so it's styled neatly. You can copy those exact classes. Bootstrap really helps out. It makes it easy to style forms so they're all neat in alignment and they look good on mobile devices. I'm also in the text box, I'll include a placeholder of title. That way the user knows what goes in there. If they're not looking at the label, it'll just give them kind of grayed out text that serves as a placeholder for now. After I've done that for the movie title, text box, and label, I'll repeat the process for the other three text boxes. Again, this is a lot of markup, but it does make the form look neat and make it mobile friendly. The name attributes and values, like I have lowercase title, lowercase genre, I will have year of release or release year and the IMDb rating. Those name values are going to dictate what I'm looking for when I do the input post values on the index page. So you'll want to pay close attention to those. They don't exactly match the fields I have in my MySQL table because I have those capitalized, but those name attributes in this markup, I need to pay close attention to those because I'm going to have to deal with those values when I try to get the values from the post. when you do your assignment, this shouldn't match exactly. You should have labels and input elements that apply to the fields that you added to your table. It should not be the same as mine with movies. After I've included my 4 text boxes and labels, at the bottom of the form I'm going to include another div. This one has, you'll see a col MD offset 2 that just moves the button over so it's in line with the text boxes. And I'm going to have a hidden element with a name of action, a value of add movie, and a submit button. It says add movie, and below that I'm going to include a paragraph with class text danger. That means the text will show up in red. I'll include a couple of styles to help make that look neat with a top margin, a font weight of bold, and in that paragraph I'll use a PHP echo statement for error. That way if there is an error that shows up, it'll show in that paragraph below the form in bold red text. After I have that form completed, I'll go back to the index.php file. At the bottom of my if statement that evaluates the action, I'll say else if action is equal to show add form. Then I'll include the view movie add form that I just worked on, and else if action equals add movie. Here's where I'll get those values from the post. I'll set title equal to filter input with the input post, and then in the quotes that title is equal to the name attribute that I gave the text box that the user enters the title. Same thing for the genre, release year, and IMDb rating. Notice how my variables in PHP use the underscore, but for release year and IMDb rating, when I gave them names, I actually used a hyphen. I like to use hyphens where possible, but PHP variables allow underscores but not hyphens. After I've retrieved those 4 values from the post, I'm going to use an if statement with OR logic. I'm going to check to see if any of those are empty. If the title or the genre or the release year or the IMDb rating is empty, then I'm going to include an error message that says all fields must contain data. Please ensure all text boxes have appropriate values. Then I will include the view movie underscore add file. That way it'll just stay in that form and that error message will show up in that paragraph. Next, before I can complete the else portion of that in the if statement, I need to actually have a query in the movie underscore db file that will add the movie to the database table. So I'll create an add movie function with title, genre, release year, IMDb rating parameters. In that function, I will set up a global db variable, and my query will be insert into movies, title, genre, release year, IMDb rating, and values. And for this query, I'm using named parameters. So everywhere I have the colon in front of my parameter name, like the title, genre, release year, and IMDb rating, I'm going to have to bind values to that. That's a secure way of creating your queries using prepared statements, so it'll help protect from SQL injection. So after I set up my statement and prepare the query, I need to bind those values. And I need to do this once for every named parameter that has a colon. So I'll bind title with the colon to the title variable that's passed into the function. Same thing for genre, release year, and IMDb rating. After I've bound all those values, I can execute the statement and close the cursor. Now I can return to that if statement in the index file, and that add movie function exists, so autocomplete will help me out with that. And I will add movie, and I have to pass all 4 of those values to that function. After I've added the movie, I want to set movies equal to get movies. That'll get all the movies from the database so I can display them in the table. And I'm going to include a comment here. I used to include the files, but instead I use that header location colon with a period. That means it comes back to this file and it clears out the post values. That way, if the user refreshes, it doesn't attempt to add that movie to the database again. You get duplicate values. Following that, I've made changes to a lot of files, so I'm going to upload the whole CRUD Part 2 folder to make sure all those files get uploaded to the server. And I will return to the web browser, press F5 to refresh. Now if I click the Add Movie button at the bottom, I'll see that I have a neatly styled form. I'll enter a movie title, a genre, release year, and IMDb rating. Click Add Movie. And you should see that Tombstone is added toward the bottom. It's not at the bottom because they're in alphabetical order. If I go back and click Add Movie, and if I try to add a movie with all those fields empty, you'll see that I get that error message in bold red text below the form. Next, I'm going to go back to the movie_db file, and I'm going to add a function called getMovieInfo. This is going to have a single parameter, the ID field. What this function will do is it will get the movie info for one movie. That way I can display it in the form to update. It'll populate the fields with the values from the table. That way the user can change them if they'd like to. So for my query, I'm going to have select asterisk from movies, where the ID equals the movie ID that I'm going to pass into the function. So I only have to bind one value for this, and that's the :movie_ID with the ID field or parameter that's get passed into the function. I'll execute the statement. For this, I will set movie equal to statement fetch. Then I can close the cursor and then return that movie to wherever the function is called from. Back at the index file, I need to add another else if statement. I'll say else if action equals show update form. I'm going to get the ID from the post value, and I will set movie equal to getMovieInfo, and I will pass it that ID. Then I can include the movie update form. I'll go to my movie add, and I'm going to press Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and in my movie update file I'm going to paste that so I don't have to type all of this again. I do need to make a few changes, however. I'll change the title to update movie, I'll change the value of the action to update movie, and I'll change the value of the button to update movie. At the top I am going to add a new div. This is going to show the ID of the movie. Since it's already been added to the table, it's going to have an ID that's auto-incremented. So I'll insert a div, a label that is for the ID input element. And I'm also going to make it so the user can't change this, since this is a field that's automatically incremented, and I don't want the user to be able to change it, but I want them to be able to see it. I'm going to make it so it's a disabled field. That way it'll be grayed out and the user can see what the ID of the movie is, or the number, but they can't change it. And notice that I'm using a value attribute, and I'm using a PHP statement that echoes that movie ID. I'm going to delete the placeholders I had previously for the add movie form, and I'll insert value attributes that will write the current value of that field to the text box of the table, or excuse me, the form from the table. So I'll do that for the title, the genre, release year, and IMDb rating. And in the square brackets and quotes, that has to match the field names exactly in the MySQL table. So that's why there's capitalization there, because those have to match up exactly with how I created those fields in the table. After that, at the bottom, I also need to include a hidden element with the name ID. That's the value of the ID, because even though I already did this at the top, when the field is disabled, it does not get passed when submitted as a post value. So I have to include the ID as a hidden input element at the bottom. Now if I save and then refresh, if I click an update button, you'll see that the form is populated with the fields from the MySQL table. I will return to the index file, and I need to include an else if action equals update movie. Now I need to retrieve all of the values from the post where the information gets sent to the form. So I'll do that for the ID, the title, genre, release year, and IMDb rating. This is going to be similar to the add movie action that I had previously. After I've retrieved all of these values from post, I'm going to include an if statement that checks if the title, genre, release year, or IMDb rating are empty. If any of those are empty, I will include the error message, get the movie info again from the table, and display that back to the user. I do not check for the ID because that is going to be passed regardless. The user can't change that, and it will get passed as that hidden element. If any of those are empty, I will include an error message that says all fields must contain data. Please ensure all text boxes have appropriate values. Again, that error message will display in a bold red font beneath the form. After the error message, I will set movie equal to get movie info with an ID parameter that I have to pass it so it knows the info of which movie it's going to retrieve, and I'll include the view movie update. After that, for the else statement, I need to go back to my movie_db file and create an update movie function. And I'll pass it all 5 parameters, or all 5 fields that I have in that table. I'll start with my global DB variable and create a query. This query is going to be a little bit different. I have to use an update query, where I'll say update movies. I'll set the ID equal to a named parameter, movie ID. I'll do that for each of the other fields in the table as well. And after I have my query set up, I'll have to bind all those values to the parameters that were passed in when I called the function. At the end of the query, I also need a where clause where I'll say where the ID equals movie_ID parameter. After I've done that, I'll set up my statement and I'll prepare the query. Then I will bind all 5 of those parameters to the values that were passed into the function. After all those values are bound, I will execute the statement or query and close the cursor. Now I can return to my index file and finish that else clause. Because I have the update movie function created, I will call that function and pass the 5 values to it. Then I will set movies equal to get movies to retrieve all the movies from the database table. Then I'll use the header, location, period to return to the index file and clear that out. That way if the user refreshes, it doesn't try to update that movie again. Now if I click the update button for Tombstone, I can create a fake movie, Tombstone 2, that's a fantasy, takes place in the year 2018, and we'll give it a low rating because that doesn't sound like a very good movie. If I click update movie, now that information for that movie has changed in the table that's displayed. I'll return to my movie_db file. I need to create one more additional function, and that is delete movie. And if I'm going to delete the movie, I need to know the ID of the movie. So I'll set up my global DB variable, my query again, which will be delete from movies, where ID is equal to a movie ID parameter, and then I will bind that parameter to the ID that's passed into the function. I'll prepare my statement, bind the value, execute the query, and close the cursor. Now I can return to my index file. At the bottom, I'll say else if action is equal to delete movie. I need to get the ID that is sent of the movie I want to delete, so I'll use ID equals filter input post ID. I'll call the delete movie function, passing that ID to it. I'll retrieve the movies from the database using the get movies function, and then I'll set the header location back to the dot, so it'll go back to this form and clear out the values and not try to delete that movie again on refresh. Now I can hit F5 to refresh, click delete on Tombstone 2, and that movie has now been removed from the table. That's a lot of functions and a lot of queries. If you need to, you can pause and rewind the video as necessary to make sure it matches your code. If you complete this first before doing the assignment, it will be very, very beneficial to you. I'm always around if you need to ask questions as well.